So good evening, everyone. I'm Ray Castillo, Minister Counselor for Public Affairs at the U.S. Embassy in Pakistan. The United States and Pakistan share a fascination with space exploration, and we are pleased that you have joined us for a discussion with one of our country's leading space scientists, the 12th Administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, General Charles Bolden, who prefers that we call him Charlie. So, more than 50 years of human activity in space have produced incredible societal benefits that improve the quality of life on Earth. The first satellites designed to study the space environment and test initial capabilities in Earth orbit contributed critical knowledge and capabilities for developing satellite telecoms, global positioning, and advances in weather forecasting. Space exploration initiated the economic development of space that today, year after year, delivers high returns for invested funds in space. And the challenges of space exploration have sparked new scientific and technological knowledge of inherent value to humankind, leading to better understanding of our universe and the solar system in which we live. Knowledge coupled with ingenuity provides people around the globe with solutions as well as useful products and services. Knowledge acquired from space exploration has also introduced new perspectives on our individual and collective place in the universe. Future space exploration goals call for sending humans and robots beyond low Earth orbit and establishing sustained access to destinations such as the Moon, asteroids, and Mars. Space agencies participating in the International Space Exploration Coordination Group are discussing an international approach for achieving these goals, documented in the group's Global Exploration Roadmap. Now, the approach begins with the International Space Station and leads to human missions to the surface of Mars. So before I turn it over, on a personal note, I'm delighted to participate tonight because I used to work for NASA as an executive TV producer of NASA TV. So I'm looking forward to Charlie's presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon Lazich. Hey, Sharon, you're muted, Sharon.
Hi, sorry, I was on mute. I made the goal. Good evening, everybody. My name is Sharon Lazich. Again, I'm glad that you can hear me now. Sorry about that. I am the acting director of USAID's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa office here at USAID Pakistan in Islamabad. And a fun fact, I am also a 2013 former presidential management fellow who also worked at NASA in the Science Mission Directorate under Charlie Bolden's leadership. I would like to welcome everyone in participating with this Facebook discussion. To any and all space enthusiasts, we welcome your questions. Please be sure to post them on our Facebook page. We have a stellar event planned with plenty of cheesy jokes sprinkled in here to include a brief presentation by Major General Charlie Bolden, followed by an extensive Q&A afterwards. I would ask that when you ask your questions via Facebook to please identify yourself and your profession if you feel comfortable doing that. We also encourage young children and students to ask questions. We tend to try and prioritize them, and we'd like to bump them to the top if possible. As Ray Castillo mentioned, today we are here to discuss commercialization of space and what's in it for humanity. This is a topic, as Charlie is well aware, that's very dear to my heart. Some of my earliest memories are of my mother and father taking me and my brothers outside to gaze at the stars, with my father narrating ancient stories of beginnings and endings, helping us to find our way and find our place in the cosmos. To discover who we are, we often look inside, but some of us also look outside and we look up. Our story, the story of humanity, is written in those stars. I have carried the mystery and wonder of the cosmos with me through my academic history and through my professional experience as well. And I am delighted to introduce former NASA Administrator Charlie Bolden. Retired Marine Corps Major General Charles Frank Bolden Jr., Charlie as he prefers that we call him, was the administrator of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, from July 2009 until January of 2017. Bolden's 34-year career with the Marine Corps included 14 years as a member of NASA's astronaut office. After joining the office in 1980, he traveled into orbit 4 times aboard the space shuttle between 1986 and 1994, commanding 2 of the missions and piloting 2 others. Today, in addition to his numerous professional affiliations, General Bolden serves as the founder and CEO emeritus of the Charles F. Bolden Group, providing leadership in the areas of space and aerospace exploration, national security, STEM education, and health initiatives. Bolden is a graduate of C.A. Johnson High School in Columbia, South Carolina. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree from the U.S. Naval Academy and a Master of Science degree from the University of Southern California. Bolden is married to the former Alexis Walker of Columbia, South Carolina. They have 2 children together, Anthony Che Bolden, Colonel, United States Marine Corps retired, and Dr. Kelly M. Bolden, MD, FACS, and 3 granddaughters, McKaylee, Kira, and Talia. Please join me in welcoming my former boss, an American hero, celebrity, icon, astronaut, Marine, aviator, and a whole slew of other descriptions that could take up this entire 1.5 hours we have slated for this event. Major General Charlie Bolden, welcome to Islamabad virtually, and I yield the floor over to you.
Sharon, thank you so very much. And to everyone in the audience, thanks for letting me take part in this event this evening. I do have one addendum to make. I actually, as of last Thursday morning, my wife and I now have our very first grandson. So our daughter, Dr. Kelly Bolden, became a mother about 6 a.m. on Thursday morning. And so we now have a young grandson to make our 4th grandchild, but that's neither here nor there. I'm incredibly excited about being able to share this time with everybody in the audience. And let me echo something that Sharon said. When we get into the Q&A, and in a live audience, Q&A starts right now. Unfortunately, with a virtual audience, you all will be coming in through Facebook and everything else. But when you do get around to it, I would really, really, really encourage you to ask any question you want. There are no dumb questions. So ask as many as you want. We'll try to get to all of them. And remember, a question that you may want to ask that may seem like it's, I don't want to ask that because I don't want to embarrass myself. I'm the dumb question asker. Sharon may not remember it, but when we were together at NASA, I was notorious for asking what appeared to be dumb questions, but it was because I wanted to know. And there's no way in the world we're all going to know everything. So what I wanted to do was talk a little bit about why space before we get too far along. So if you all will indulge me, I'm gonna use some slides. And I know sometimes for virtual presentations, that's awful. But if you'll bear with me, I'm gonna go ahead and share some slides with you, and that'll give me an opportunity to at least let you see a little bit about why we do what we do. So you know, among the things that people wonder about or think about is, what in the world is it that's so fantastic about space, and why do people want to spend time there? One of the questions that I'm frequently asked is, why do we spend so much money in space when there's so many problems here on Earth that need to be solved? And my response to you in simplistically would be, you know, we're not spending a dime in space, first of all. And secondly, all the work that we do in space is done for the benefit of humanity. I like to remind people that NASA's vision essentially says that we seek knowledge, and everything we learn, we utilize for the benefit of humanity back here on the planet. So if you keep that in mind, it may help you a little bit to understand what it is we do. Here's a little bit more scientific rationale for what we do. Are we alone? How many of you wonder that? I do all the time. Are there other habitable planets? And is there life elsewhere in our universe? So those are the 3 primary questions. And if you look at an agency like NASA or many of the other academic endeavors around college campuses, sometimes in think tanks like you have there in Islamabad. You may be asking the same questions. Are we alone here on this planet? Are there other habitable planets? And is there life elsewhere? NASA's big goal in going to Mars is to really complete its search for life, because we suspect that at one time, Mars may very well have been a planet that was not very much unlike Earth, a fertile planet, temperate climate and everything. And then several billion years ago, it lost its protective shell, its magnetosphere. And all of a sudden the atmosphere started getting scraped away, the temperature plunged. And so it is the Mars that we know today. So those are some of the things. You know, we don't get to see our planet from this vantage point recently. This was, you know, during the days of the Apollo era. Apollo astronauts traveling back and forth to the moon had an opportunity to see our planet like this. But this is a view that we hope some astronauts from around the world will see in the next 5 or 10 years. It's our goal and our hope that we'll put humans back on the surface of the moon to do exploration there, and they'll get an opportunity to peer back and see our planet from this vantage point. One of the things that I like about this picture is that it shows you, gives you a little bit of evidence that, boy, we live on a water planet. You happen to be looking at some of the largest continents. So these are some of the largest land masses on our planet. But boy, most of the time when you're orbiting Earth once every 90 minutes, going 17,500 miles an hour, most of what you see is like this. It's water. We're up in here somewhere up in Pakistan, or you all are. I'm way back around on the other side of the globe right now. But actually today in spacecraft like the International Space Station or the SpaceX Crew Dragon or anything else, this is more like the image that you get to see of Earth. And so I want to point out a couple of points to you. If you look right here where my arrow is pointed, that very, very thin blue line, that's our atmosphere. That's all there is. And that's what sustains our life. And so it's very important that we try to protect that. You know, global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it, a lot of things are really threatening the health of our atmosphere. So we need to think about how we better protect it and the like. For those of you wondering, who may be wondering about where this is on the planet, this is Western Saudi Arabia, the Sinai Peninsula, the Gulf of Aqaba, the Red Sea, Eastern Egypt with the Nile River running to the north and the Nile River Delta. And one thing I like to point out to people, what is missing in this picture? What don't you see? You don't see borders and you don't see boundaries. And this was one of the emotional experiences for me as I was talking with Sharon and some of the others in preparation for this day. I said, you know, technically, I don't think there was anything I wasn't qualified for on every space shuttle mission I took. Emotionally, I wasn't ready. I wasn't anywhere close to being prepared. And it was because I wasn't ready to see our planet in all of its beauty and grandeur the way you do, with no borders, no boundaries between the countries and between the people. And so on this evening where we gather around the world, actually, but most of you there in Islamabad or around Pakistan, hopefully we'll all take time and take stock in knowing that we're all the same. We're all human beings. We should all be working to preserve our planet, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as the evening goes on. This is a view that astronauts get when they're flying in space. It's actually either I think this is the Aurora Australis down around the South Pole. There are similar views around the North Pole as the International Space Station goes around Earth once every 90 minutes. Then astronauts get a chance to see this kind of view when they're near the poles 16 times every normal Earth day. Because in a 90-minute orbit, you have 45 minutes of daylight, 45 minutes of darkness, 45 minutes of daylight, 45 minutes of darkness. Every single sunrise and sunset is absolutely incredible. Now, what about you? Where do you come into the game or into the story we're trying to tell? Yes, NASA's on a journey to Mars with the rest of the world, but Sharon and I both love one organization, both organizations that are represented in this picture. This is the former USAID administrator, Raja. He and I were shaking hands. I think this was like probably 2014 as we had renegotiated and re-signed the agreement for NASA and the U.S. Agency for International Development to partner in making the world a better place. And some of the work we did together was advancing agriculture around the world. Servir is a program that's sponsored mainly by USAID, but supported largely by NASA. And we both send scientists around the world. We have 4 hubs. One is in Kathmandu, Nepal, in which Pakistan participates. It's called Servir Himalayas. We have 2 in Africa, one in Nairobi, Kenya, one in Niamey, Niger, and another hub in Bangkok, Thailand, that serves the Mekong region. So those centers, those Servir centers, work with farmers, national leaders, private sector people on things like disaster planning, disaster relief, water resources management, crop development, and the like. And so you can see some of the work that's going on here, and just trying to help people around the world make their world a much better place than it is today. So that's some of the work that NASA and USAID do together. Remember, I asked you about, are there other planets that may be able to sustain life? We do believe that there are some. We call them exoplanets. And as we search for them, we've now identified a little bit more than 3,000 other planets orbiting other stars. So if you stop and think about it, we believe that almost every planet, every sun in the universe has an orbital system that has any number of planets orbiting it. So think about the possibility of life elsewhere in the universe if there are really, really, really billions and billions of planets out there. One of the ways we intend to study these planets that we think might harbor life is with the James Webb Space Telescope, scheduled to be launched later in this year. It is a massive telescope. As you can see, that's a person right there, and that's a person right there. And these are 18 movable mirror segments. So this is a segmented mirror that makes this telescope look quite different from what most of us are accustomed to seeing. What we think of a telescope as a tube, and the astronomers go and look through the eyepiece. Not anymore. This one will be about 1.5 million kilometers away from Earth, and beam signals back so that scientists around the world can help us study some of these exoplanets. And this Hubble, this is the successor of Hubble. This one actually has the power to allow us to look into the atmosphere of some of these exoplanets and actually tell what that atmosphere is made of, and give us an even better idea of whether or not we really think it can sustain life. Now, we were talking about commercial space. What is that? Commercial space is the action that NASA and a lot of other government agencies in the United States have taken to say, okay, NASA doesn't need to build and own rocket ships anymore. We don't need to do transportation to space when the private sector does it as well, if not better than us. So now we go out and we look for commercial partners who build satellites either to take cargo. This is one called Cygnus, originally built by a company called Orbital Sciences, a small company when it started here in the United States, it's actually right outside of Washington, D.C. They became pretty good, and then a large aeronautics company, Northrop Grumman, bought Orbital, and so now this is the Northrop Grumman Cygnus spacecraft. The next one that we fly a lot, this is called the SpaceX Dragon. This was the first commercial cargo module to go to space, launched by a commercial company carrying NASA cargo and then returning it back to Earth. So the Dragon is a little bit unique in that it is able to come back to Earth intact and bring supplies back and forth between the International Space Station and Earth. There is a variant to this that's called the Crew Dragon that you'll see a little bit about later on, but it carries up to a crew of 7. This has been our long-term partner. This is the Russian Soyuz. After we lost the Columbia space shuttle in 2003, we went through an almost 3-year period of time where we had no American capability to get people to space, and yet we had an orbiting, operating International Space Station that needed to have crews taken back and forth. And we made an agreement back then with the Russians, which exists even to today, that we would ask them to carry 3 crew members at a time to the International Space Station, while America used its space shuttle to complete the construction of the International Space Station. So we had a 7-member crew on shuttle that did mostly construction work to build the International Space Station, build it out, and the Russians took our crew members in the Soyuz spacecraft to the International Space Station. We still fly with them every once in a while, but we now thankfully have American spacecraft that can carry our crews. This is another cargo vehicle called the HTV. It's built by the Japanese Space Agency, and it is the largest cargo module that we had. It carries more cargo than anything else, but unfortunately, like Cygnus, it doesn't have a re-entry capability, so it burns up during re-entry, making, again, the SpaceX Dragon the only spacecraft that we can take cargo to and from space today. And then this one is one that most of you have not seen, but I'm really excited about it because because it is actually a glider that turns into it's a rocket ship that turns into a glider when it comes back to Earth. It's a miniature shuttle, and it's called the Dream Chaser. It's scheduled to fly later this year or early next year, built by a company called Sierra Nevada out of Colorado, and it will carry cargo initially and then be converted to a crew vehicle that can carry up to 7 crew members. So really excited about all of those. This was a crew that I wanted to show you because they are the very first operational crew to fly on the SpaceX Dragon. They spent 6 months in space, becoming the first crew to actually deploy to space in a commercial vehicle. All of them were space veterans, and they were commanded by Mike Hopkins right here, who is a graduate of the University of Illinois, actually played football there, and then got an engineering degree and became a NASA astronaut. Shannon Walker, the young lady here, was once my instructor, taught me everything I know about computers. And so anything I did right about computers when I flew in on the space shuttle, Shannon gets the credit. Anything I did wrong, it's because I didn't pay attention in her classes. Victor Glover, Victor became the first long duration African-American astronaut to fly. So Victor has quite a bit of renown. He's a combat veteran, F-18 fighter pilot who later became a test pilot and astronaut. I'm going to show you a real quick video. One of the things that's really important to us at NASA and here in the United States is the concepts of diversity, inclusion, and equity. And I know the U.S. Embassy spends a lot of time trying to work with all of you in Pakistan to help you understand how your country becomes so much better when you look at a diverse workforce and you look at an inclusive workforce where everyone has an opportunity to contribute to the decisions that are being made. And then equity, where you take advantage of the opportunity to look at people who may not have been on a level playing field in the past, and you try to balance or level that playing field for them. So this is a video, real quick video that we did for the International Year of the Woman. And take a look at it. I think you'll be surprised. That's my hero, Katherine Johnson. We'll talk a little bit about her after the video. Take a mental picture of this young lady. She's Christina Koch, and she's a history maker also, and I'll tell you about her. So that's sort of just a little peek at NASA making history and women having contributed to that. So when we talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, that's the example that we're really trying to set. I told you, Katherine Johnson was my hero. Some of you, I'm not sure what it may have been called in Pakistan, but there's a movie about NASA called Hidden Figures, and Katherine Johnson was one of the stars in the movie Hidden Figures because she was one of the first women who actually did trajectory analysis and trajectory planning for the early Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo astronauts, and actually was the one that was responsible for the safe launch and return of John Glenn on his first orbital flight. And then the first time we went to the moon on Apollo 11, it was Katherine Johnson who led the team doing the analysis that got us there. The second woman that I pointed out to you was Christina Koch. Christina became the first woman of any nationality to spend a year in space. So she She and Scott Kelly are the two Americans who have spent an entire year in space. Christina also became world renowned when she and her crewmate, Jessica Meir, did the first ever all-woman spacewalk or extravehicular activities, EVA as we call it in NASA. And it was long awaited, long overdue, and absolutely spectacular as they did a number of all-woman spacewalks. This is the vehicle we use today. It's the International Space Station. Important for people to know, if there are any kids on the line with us today, if you're 20 years or less, you've not taken a single breath when human beings have not been living and working on the International Space Station. It's always been an international crew. We've gone down to 2 crew members a couple of times, but it's been a Russian and an American who have always been there tending the station, since we're the 2 primary partners. But we've had representatives from about 16 different nations to date actually fly and work on the International Space Station. And my hope is that some of you, if we can convince either tonight, convince Suparko and the Pakistani Space Agency to really go great guns and get into human space flight and take advantage of the availability of commercial flights today, maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, we'll be able to brag and say there's a Pakistani astronaut who's orbiting Earth on the International Space Station doing research to benefit the people of Pakistan. This is a little bit about science on the station. People always ask me, what did you do when you went to space? And I tell them I did a lot of things. I was a pilot, so my responsibility was either flying the space shuttle, which you don't do a lot of, the computers do most of the work, or supervising what was going on. But this is me on my final space shuttle mission, my 4th flight in 1994. And the gentleman, I am the guinea pig in this one. So you say, what do? We do a lot of biomedical research. And in this particular case, you can see I have a catheter in my left arm, and I'm holding vials of my own blood. My partner there, Dr. Franklin Chang Diaz, born and raised in San Jose, Costa Rica, but decided at the age of 7 that he was going to be an astronaut. His dad didn't believe him, but finally at the age of 17, when he graduated from high school, his father sent him to the United States with $50 in cash, a one-way ticket to Hartford, Connecticut, and a note to a friend of his that said, "This is my son, Franklin, who thinks he wants to be an astronaut. Humor him for as long as you can, and then send him back home, and I'll reimburse you for the ticket." And Franklin went on to graduate with honors from the University of Connecticut, although he spoke no English when he got there, taught himself English, went to MIT and got a PhD in plasma physics, and today is one of the world's foremost plasma physicists, and the designer of a plasma fusion rocket engine called Basimer that may one day cut the time to travel to Mars in half, if not even more. But we were actually doing a blood experiment here where we alternated days. One day I was the guinea pig, and he would, using a catheter, draw my blood to send back to Earth or take back to Earth to study how our bodies changed over the course of our 7 days in flight. And on alternate days, I would take a turn doing Franklin. What about our climate? What about our planet? Let's think about it a little bit. You know, you hear the term climate change. I think you had two scientists, Pakistani scientists last week, if you were a part of the speaker series then, and then a NASA scientist who talked a lot about the science that's done with satellites and the like. This is a compilation of data that has come from measurements here on Earth, but also more recently from satellite data that show you how the temperature on our planet has changed through the centuries, as a matter of fact. So this is going to go from 1880 through 1995, and I'll give you a hint. If you look at the scale on the left, the blue, that's okay because that's cooler than the nominal time record for temperatures on Earth. That's about where we would like to be at 0, and the differential here when it gets yellow and then red, that's bad. That's not good for us as people, because remember I talked about that thin blue atmosphere. There's a lot of stuff that we can't sustain at some of the temperatures that you're going to see here. So remember, this is time-lapse photography from the late 1800s all the way up to I think 1995, and I think you'll get the picture here. We're not doing well. We're allowing our planet to cook. It's getting hotter and hotter with each passing decade, and when you get to today, it's much worse than you will see here. So this actually goes out to 2015. So that's the way the planet looks worse than that actually today. So that's not where we want to be. So we all need to do our part in trying to combat climate change and the like. So I just thought I would use those slides to give you some feel for what's going on now and why space is important and what role Pakistan should be playing and can play in it. The fact that we now have commercial entities, meaning private entities, non-government entities that can get people and things to space, can operate with those things and people in space so that we're able to do research in the microgravity environment of space that we really can't do very well down here on Earth, where gravity messes everything up. If you're wondering, the little orb that keeps going around in front of Earth every once in a while, this is time-lapse photography also. That's our moon. So you're getting an opportunity to see a side of the moon, not really a side, but you're getting an opportunity to see what we call the backside of the moon, because the moon rotates on its axis about once every 28 days. So we on Earth see the same side all the time just because of the rate at which the moon is rotating. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and we're going to go back to Sharon and see if we can answer some of the questions that some of you all may have. Remember the rules. Rule number 1, ask any question you want to ask anytime you want to ask lots of them. Rule number 2, and the most important rule, there are no dumb questions. So let's go, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation, a wonderful introduction into the topic, and it's very apropos given the first question. I'm going to kick it off. And again, just a reminder, as he just mentioned, to please ask your questions via Facebook Live. So the first question that I have in reflecting on former NASA astronaut Michael Collins from the Apollo 11, he is quoted as saying, "Exploration is not a choice, really. It's an imperative." And you sort of answered this question through your presentation, and I'm hoping we can suss it out a little bit more. But why the imperative to do it now? And importantly, particular to Pakistan, why should they be investing in space and in space technologies?
Well, it's always been critical and always been important for nations of the world to explore, but never more important than today for a number of reasons. One is we're suffering through a pandemic right now. We need to understand what causes diseases, how do we combat them, how do we produce vaccines and other drugs to combat the diseases. The research that I showed you, some of the research going on the International Space Station, is stuff like an art we call protein crystal growth, because gravity is taken out of the equation. As we go around Earth once every 90 minutes, we create a force called centrifugal force, and it combats gravity. So the astronaut and everything on board kind of seems to float. We're actually constantly trying to fall back to earth, but centrifugal force won't let us. So we're caught in the middle and we float. And taking gravity out of the equation means that if I want to grow a very nice crystal, I don't have gravity that causes it all to want to fall into the bottom of the container. It all just floats around in the medium, whether it's water or another nutrient that's feeding the crystal and helping it to grow larger and larger. So I get very, very perfectly spherical crystals of protein that scientists then can bring back to Earth, can slice and dice and look at the makeup of that protein crystal. And frequently we'll take like a flu protein and we'll look at it and we'll try to manufacture something that perfectly fits its shape and size and negates its ability to I use a very scientific term, to glom on to cells in the body or onto blood cells or things like that. So that's the way that scientists, develop, for example, the RNA vaccines of today, the ones that companies like Moderna and Pfizer developed to combat COVID-19. They are the result of decades of research and now being able to take advantage of protein crystal growth that gives them protein crystals that they can actually study a lot better than they would be able to do down here on Earth. So it's imperative that we keep that kind of research going on and that we find the optimal place to do it, and that happens to be space. The other thing we were looking at was the fact that our climate is dramatically changing. We need to know why that's happening. What is happening that causes the ocean to be constantly heating more and more and more, to have storms that are becoming more and more violent and more frequent, if you will. So if we want to save the planet, we've got to take action now. And the best way to take action is to know what it is you're trying to do by knowing what it is you're trying to combat. The other final emotional thing is I want everybody possible on the planet to leave the planet for just a very brief period of time, to have an opportunity to look at it from the vantage point that I had in my 4 space shuttle missions. When you get a chance to see that, no, there really aren't any borders and boundaries down there. People talking about my country being different from that country, we're all on this planet together and we've all got to work to preserve it and do the best we can. So imperatives, as Michael Collins said, that we continue to explore and find out as much as we can about our solar system in which we live, to understand our own home planet a lot better than we do today.
Excellent answer. Thank you so much. We have a question from Syed Nasser Wajahat. How do you see Pakistan's future in the space industry? Does NASA collaborate with Pakistan? And when does NASA plan to send a man or a woman to Mars?
Let me answer the last one first. Humans are going to Mars in the 2030s, which means next decade. So this is 2021. In the next 18, 19 years, I actually believe we'll definitely have humans working in the Martian environment, which means either orbiting Mars on one of its moons, Phobos or Deimos, doing robotic activity down on the surface, or preferably, and I really think we'll have humans on the surface of Mars before the end of the decade of the 2030s. What can Pakistan do? Pakistan can do everything that's going on today, and you can do it on the International Space Station, or even more importantly, in the next 5 years or so, you're going to start seeing not only are commercial entities producing launch vehicles, but they're starting to, and satellites that we use for Earth observation. But we have a few companies that are starting to produce actual modules that can be flown in space for people to do, in which people can do research. There are companies like NanoRacks in the United States, Axiom Space here in the United States, that hopefully by 2024, 2025, we'll actually have orbiting space stations on which we can do individual things like pharmaceuticals research, materials science on another one, biomedical research on one. And Pakistan should be at the table and should actually have a crew member or a scientist who's actually involved in the research that's going on that orbiting space station. The best way to do that, 3 things that the country has to decide, that the leadership has to decide, that they're going to enhance ways to allow students to study more and more STEM courses or science, technology, engineering, math, the arts and design we add, here in the United States, because it is critically important not just to have people who are technically oriented, but people who also use the artistic side of their brain, because things like spacesuits need to be designed so that they're not only comfortable, but that they look good. That's pretty important. So we need people in the arts and design world also. And Pakistan should be right in there with everyone else. I mentioned the company Axiom Space. Axiom Space has actually made some overtures to Saparco, to the Pakistani Space Agency, about helping them to select and then train a Pakistani astronaut and allow them to fly on some mission, some commercial mission, to the International Space Station. Not sure where where your country is right now in that regard, but that would be really exciting to see a Pakistani astronaut join other nations on the International Space Station doing research.
Great. A quick follow-up question to the opportunities for Pakistan. Mohammed Uzair Riaz asks, what are the current challenges for a country like Pakistan regarding space exploration?
Oh, is it Mohammed? Was that his name?
Mohammed Uzair, yes.
Yeah, Mohammed, you're in response to your question, there are numerous challenges. There's always the challenge of finances. How does the country budget its funds so that it can develop and support a thriving exploration program or research and development program? That is not just something that Pakistan struggles with. The United States right now, our Congress is going through machinations about where should we put our research and development money? Should we look a lot more at basic fundamental research, or should we be looking at operational research or what we call applied science research and the like? And those are decisions that the Pakistani government will have to make. I think there are probably a number of think tanks represented in this forum, universities. So it's actually the universities that can take a leading role in developing the scientists and engineers and artists and designers for the future. So allowing kids to study really hard, providing the internet availability so that they can communicate broadly with the rest of the world, work really hard, which means practice, practice, practice. I know for those of you who play football, we call it soccer here in the US, you know that if you want to be on the world stage, you've got to practice. We've got the Summer Olympics upcoming. Every single athlete there who will be competing has spent the vast majority of their life just practicing and working really hard. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, most importantly, is never be afraid of failure. Never let anyone tell you what you cannot do. So for the youngsters that are joining us in this forum, study hard, work hard, never, ever, ever be afraid of failure. Don't let anybody tell you, no matter what segment of society you come from, what race you may be, what gender, what nationality, you can do whatever you want to do if you're willing to do those three things. And don't let other people tell you what you can or cannot do.
Excellent advice. And I believe in, having read your bio numerous times, one that speaks very closely to your own personal experience, having had to fight very hard to be able to study the sciences and to get into the Naval Academy. And then, my God, I can't imagine where we would be without having had your contribution to our space program. So on behalf of all of society, we're grateful that you continue to fight and that you continue to encourage students to fight along with you as well. We have a follow-up question related to universities that I think may be tangentially related. Yasser Hamid states, and this is more of a comment, and I'm going to hope to reply to it. Hi, the U.S. did excellent work for collaboration in the energy sector with National University and Sciences and Technology NUS and USP CASE. I hope we can have another collaboration either with the Institute of Space and Technology or another university along with the Higher Education Commission's help. This will also enable us to work on our own satellite and explore more in space research. And so part of this could be the discussion of Surveyor, but part of it is just the R&D partnerships between various universities. Can you speak briefly to how our education system forms partnerships with education systems, for instance, in Pakistan, and what the outcome of those types of partnerships can look like?
Yeah, Sir, your question really comes to a number of things that are near and dear to my heart. When I became the NASA administrator in 2009, in President Obama's administration, his first direction to me was go out and enlarge the number of non-traditional partners that NASA had, which meant go find countries that wanted to be a part of the family of spacefaring nations, but either didn't have the finances to do it or didn't have the technical expertise. And then find ways for NASA to get involved with them through partnerships. And so over the course of time that I was there and going on into today, NASA has more than 800 active international agreements with more than 120 countries around the world. And those agreements may be anything from as basic as STEM education, working with students in elementary school on a program called GLOBE, where we give them tools like an anemometer or a thermometer to go outside and spin the anemometer and come back in and measure relative humidity, or go outside and take the temperature and come back. And then they go onto the GLOBE website, enter the data, and they instantly have become partners in international research and development on the climate. So that's the way we get a lot of our data from around the world, is through the GLOBE program. There are Aeronet, a lot of other programs in which young people can participate. NASA is a huge sponsor of a program called First Robotics, and it's a program for school-age kids. They call it First Legos at the intermediate school level or middle school level, and in high school, university in some countries, we call it First Robotics. But it really tries to get kids interested in playing and working with robots and getting robots to compete, to do different games and the like. It takes a lot of that pent-up energy, and instead of fighting each other, they do battle on the field of play with their robots. Some of the other things that can be done. But in addition, we've got if you remember the photo I showed you of Administrator Jar and I signing an agreement between USAID and NASA, we do the same thing with foreign countries, and we seek to sign what's called an umbrella agreement. That means we can work back and forth among our space agencies, among our technical and scientific organizations in the country. We look to help to encourage our universities to form partnerships with international universities. So some right there in Islamabad, hopefully will team up with a school from say like Texas A&M or MIT or Stanford in partnerships, do exchange programs. NASA actually has an international exchange program where, with the support of your own country, with the support of the Pakistani government, to get you to the United States, if you're accepted into the program, you actually can do several weeks to several months at one of the 9 NASA centers around the country, where you get an opportunity to work alongside a NASA scientist or engineer, and then come back to Pakistan, take the experience that you've had and try to pass it on to your peers, or hopefully it will inspire you to want to really stay in science and engineering, and maybe form your own company or become a professor or do something else like that. So a number of those programs are ongoing, and I appreciate your asking the question to point those out.
Yeah, and I would also take the opportunity to point him to the Fulbright scholarship opportunity to be able to study abroad, to continue to learn. And if you're interested in looking more about Servier and NASA USAID's partnership, you can go to servierglobal.net. I believe they recently had an event to train Pakistani women engineers on using low Earth orbit satellites to be able to assess some space data and cloud cover and things of that nature as well. So there certainly are opportunities there, and hopefully we can post those on Facebook as well. So stay tuned for that. We have a question from Peter Apachin, who's a climate adaptation advisor for USAID and also an avid Charlie Bolden fan. There are lots of those. We know that the view from space can inform climate action, both adaptation and mitigation. In the context of space commercialization, what role can the private sector play in accelerating and scaling action to address the climate crisis?
Peter, I think what the private sector is already doing is the private sector is generating data flows that that are unmatched by anything that we used to be able to do. You know, NASA's satellite constellations and the like are, for the most part, million-dollar, multi-million-dollar, if not billion-dollar satellites. The commercial sector has come along, and we've miniaturized things. I mentioned a company called NanoRacks. NanoRacks is an American company that actually will go into schools and help teach kids how to produce really small satellites that they can then take to the International Space Station and launch through from the International Space Station. So school kids can actually launch their own satellite. And we've gotten to the point with the instruments today, we can miniaturize our Earth observing capability. We can put swarms of satellites out and get much more data back to Earth for use in helping us to understand carbon dioxide concentrations in our atmosphere, other greenhouse gases, pollution in our ocean. We're actually, I just was reading an article the other day where we now have satellites that enable us to follow plastic material that is beginning to over pollute our ocean. It damages fish, it endangers their very existence. And so we are now able to even track the movement of these plastic materials that are actually just nothing but waste, to track it going around the world. And that's because of the advent and the onset of more and more commercially available satellites and commercially available sensors. Some flown from airplanes, some in buoys, but many of them on satellites that are flying around on small microsats and minisats and the like.
So you mentioned something that I think this might flow sort of naturally from, and this is a combination of two questions. There was a question by Abdul Hamid, and then I'm also going to mix it or combine it with a question from Julie Conan and Chris Hines. Since 1957, there have been over 6,000 rocket launches, and as of 2019, the European Space Agency estimates that almost 1 million pieces of debris greater than 1 centimeter are in orbit, any of which could be fatal to an astronaut or a satellite. As more and more countries develop their space programs, are there strategies in place to mitigate additional garbage or space debris?
Abdul, Chris, and Julie, fantastic points. Let me tell you, we have always known that orbital debris, particularly in low Earth orbit, where humans tend to spend most of their time on the International Space Station or soon just plain old tourist flights, that's the most dangerous area for us here on Earth, because that's where the concentration of spent rocket parts, just junk that's generated from other sources. And so we have always known in organizations like NASA, the Department of Defense, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, that we needed to try to find a way to clean up low Earth orbit by not just mitigating, not just preventing orbital debris, but removing it, the plethora of it that's there right now. Governments have been very slow to do so. And again, it's the battle, the competition for funding. Everybody knows that we need to do it, but who's going to give up a critical satellite that they want to launch in order to put funds into a satellite that can be used to clean up low Earth orbit? But we now know that that's essential. So the commercial sector has stepped up. And what has also happened is a lot of smaller nations that would not normally be doing this kind of business are also stepping up. I have had the pleasure of working with a company called D-Orbit out of Italy that now is building a satellite that can do orbital debris removal. The Japanese have private companies that are looking at small satellites that can do orbital debris removal. And it could be something as simple as just, it kind of flies through low Earth orbit, kind of gobbling up debris, like in a James Bond movie, or it could be dragging a very powerful electromagnet in its trail, just attracting metallic particles. So there are a number of different ideas that people have toyed with, but it's really not been until the commercial sector has taken an interest in this and trying to, one, save their satellites, but also make it safer for human beings who are flying in places like the International Space Station. We actually had a strike on the arm of the International Space Station several weeks ago that did some minor damage to it, but that's just a precursor of what could happen with the growing presence of orbital debris in low Earth orbit, where we happen to be.
Thank you. And yeah, just to echo the international cooperation that has to take place with that sort of massive cleanup, because there is so much in low Earth orbit, the imperative is certainly there. And clearly there's also an industry for it as well. I want to switch gears really quickly. We have a question from Faizan Alam. How can a common Pakistani who doesn't have much formal education but has knowledge about space become a part of NASA?
Faizan, a disappointing answer, first of all, but an encouraging piece of it. You don't need to become a part of NASA to make a contribution to space exploration. Suparco, and I must admit, I don't know a lot about Suparco. I've just recently learned about them, and I understand it's the Pakistani Space Agency. There may be someone in this forum who can speak to what they do, or maybe later on the US Embassy will help to present them to an audience like this so they can talk a little bit about what they're doing. But the big thing again is to get as much more education as you can. If you can, get a college degree, great. If you can't, do the best you can, but work very diligently to become a part of the community of space explorers that's growing slowly there in Pakistan. It's very difficult to make the journey to the United States as an immigrant, get the schooling you need and then try to compete for a position with NASA. But you don't need to. You don't even need to be in a national space organization anymore to actually go to space, because of the increased presence of commercial companies that are willing, like SpaceX and Axiom, Blue Origin, Sierra Nevada, Virgin Galactic. These are all companies that are either flying what we call suborbital space flight, where you go into out of the atmosphere and then turn around and come right back down, much the same way that we did here in the United States with Alan Shepard when he became the first American to go to space. That's essentially what Virgin Galactic does, and in fact, their founder and owner, Sir Richard Branson, is scheduled to fly maybe early next month. He and his other billionaire friend, Jeff Bezos, the founder and leader of Blue Origin, are trying to see which billionaire is going to actually go to space first, and both have targeted the month of July to make their maiden voyages into space. But there's so many commercial capabilities nowadays that are available that you too can make a contribution if you just kind of talk to people there in the US Embassy in the science section. They can probably point you in the right direction, or even they may be able to even help connect you with companies in Pakistan that are working on some space research and development.
Great. Faizan Liaquat has a question. Is it possible that in the future, people from Earth could live on Mars without having an artificial environment like created gravity, imported water, and or food from Earth?
Faizan, you never say never. And it is our hope that in the very near future, people will be able to live on Mars, at least for periods of time, like we do on the International Space Station today. And as we do, say, for a place like Antarctica. It may be that someone goes on a Mars expedition and they spend a year, maybe two, on the planet. The difficulty right now is because it's mostly a carbon dioxide atmosphere and it's very cold. You won't want to try to live on the surface. You'd want to get yourself away from where the radiation is most damaging. And so I believe that in the next 10 years or so, NASA and many of our international partners are going to begin sending armies of robots to the Martian surface. And they're going to go in and they're going to burrow into the ground or excavate caves and the like, and make habitats in which humans can live. That will allow us to, like I said, to become inhabitants of the Martian environment for a year or two or something like that, but not for much longer periods of time, because it's actually a hostile planet right now. But if you remember back to the science on the space station video I showed you, you actually saw Scott Kelly and some of his crewmates cutting what looked like maybe lettuce to you. That's because they were cutting up lettuce and it was the first crop of lettuce that had been grown on the International Space Station. Today, we're growing cherry tomatoes, we're growing beans, and a number of other vegetables. We use processes like hydroponics, where you just kind of hang plants and you spray water on their roots and spray water and nutrients. So those are ways that we've learned. We're doing a lot of research with food planning and development, or food manufacture. We actually have 3D printers on board now. We're learning how to 3D print food. And I know that sounds kind of strange, but we use microbes, little microbes, bugs as the feedstock. And we're actually able to 3D print food. We're working cooperatively with an Israeli company right now that's called, I think it's Aleph Farms. And Aleph actually makes meat. They 3D print meat using just some tissue from cattle as the feedstock, and then they print what becomes a steak or a lamb chop or whatever you want.
I don't remember this specifically being in the Physics of Star Trek book, but it does sound uniquely like the Replicator, just saying.
The Replicator, I got it.
I'm going to switch gears a little really quickly to some more of the geopolitical aspects of that drive innovation in space commercialization and competition, which can really lead to innovation. Michael Nearbus, who is a USA Deputy Mission Director, asks, can you share the differences between space programs under authoritarian regimes like Russia and China versus democratic models like the United States and the EU? And I built in a follow-up question, or is there a competing economic models that might also be a driver of differences versus centrally planned economies versus market economies?
Michael, I've thought a lot about this over the last few weeks, to be quite honest. And the reason I've thought so much about it is because of this surge in activity by China. China is really out to make its mark as a leader in space exploration. They've landed a lander and a rover on the backside of the moon. They now have a lander and a rover on Mars and an orbiter. So they're very, very rapidly trying to replicate things that the United States has done. One, because I think they want to be able to claim their place, their rightful place as a leader in space exploration. I think the thing that may be different and may respond to your question is the model in a democratic nation like the United States is freedom of commercial entities and freedom of the private individual to compete with government. That doesn't happen in China. I think it's something that they would like to see. When we look at the Russian space program as an example, Russia has now, the Russian Space Agency and the Russian government have now stood up an organization that I think is called Glascosmos. And it is an attempt to say that there is a private company that people can go to train and then fly to space, or people can train and then do experiments in space from the private sector. I think that remains to be seen whether an authoritarian government like Russia or China will actually be willing to give that freedom to the private sector the way we do in the United States. Today in the United States, I'll give you the example again of NanoRacks. NanoRacks actually went to battle against war. Its founder, Jeffrey Mambury, many, many years ago, a couple of decades ago, felt that there was a potential business in space tourism. And he had a number of people who were willing to pay quite a bit of money to go to space. And he tried to convince NASA that they should get involved in space tourism and allow a company with which he worked, I want to say it was Space Adventures or Space Frontiers or something, to allow them to go out and recruit people who would train and then go to space as tourists. NASA in the US in our infinite wisdom said, no, we don't want to do that. So he went to Russia and he worked with Roscosmos, the Russian space agency. They needed money. And so they said, hey, we'll help. And then he had to come back and he had to battle the Congress, he had to battle NASA and everything, because nobody wanted, an American entity to be involved with flying Russian citizens to space and giving them an advantage of looking like they were, a democratic country where people could do whatever they wanted to do. NanoRacks has actually recently flown a Chinese experiment to the International Space Station, whereas NASA is forbidden by law to be involved in any bilateral activities with China. I think these things will go away over time. But in the meantime, the commercial sector, again, that's what we're talking about. The commercial sector is stepping in to do things that government organizations cannot do because Congress controls what we do and what we can't do. The commercial sector, Congress has got to say, okay, we want to stop you from being able to do your business, and we want to keep you from making money. That's a little bit harder in a democratic society like we have here in the United States. So don't know if that answers your question adequately, but I think dramatic difference between the way the United States is approaching international partnerships, commercial and academic partnerships, and the way that authoritarian nations are only wishing they had it because they haven't exactly figured out how to do it yet. They don't have a true commercial sector because everything's tied to the government. And so they've got to figure out, how do we do this commercial thing?
I have a slightly longer follow-up question as it relates to China, so bear with me here. NASA and USAID have been collaborating for more than a decade to leverage both agencies' expertise and assets in addressing international development challenges. USAID has a local presence and relationships in developing countries and works on issues that require data in places where data is often scarce, including Pakistan. In recent years, China has positioned itself to be the partner nation of choice for future space exploration missions, particularly for developing countries. Do you see NASA or the United States adjusting to this new reality and perhaps pursuing some non-traditional partnerships vis-a-vis space exploration? And I say that in the context of the U.S. typically engaging with the European Space Agency, with the Japanese Space Agency. We have some traditional partners, but there are some developing countries out there that are really coming to the fore. And can you speak a little bit to how we engage more of the developing countries vis-a-vis a country like China who's willing to invest significantly in their space programs?
Sharon, since you and I both love NASA and USAID, let me brag about USAID and the NASA partnership a little bit, because I think it may answer your question directly. If you think about how USAID works, the Severe program, we don't go in and build out a hub. We go into a country that's conveniently located and has the broadband, if you will, availability to communicate with neighboring countries on common causes. For example, Severe Himalayas looks at things like snow and ice melts in the Himalayan mountains for providing water, fresh drinking water, to people downstream from the mountain snow melts and the like. There we work collaboratively with China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bhutan, probably Russia. We work with about 9 or 10 different nations. But what we did was we went into Kathmandu and we found an existing environmental center that was hosted and run by the Nepalese government. We didn't go in and build a place out with American scientists and the like. So we put the Severe program on top of an existing national entity in that country. Same thing in Nairobi, Kenya. And it was much more difficult in Niamey, Niger, because some of you who study this kind of stuff know that Niamey is probably, if not the poorest and most illiterate country in the whole African continent. But we found that they had an existing environmental program that we could go in and partner with them and help to teach children, students, try to get them interested in STEM and STEM education. The Chinese were in Niamey, Niger at the same time that we were. They actually built the roads that led to the Severe hub. However, it was all Chinese labor. They trained no one to do anything. They left nothing behind except pollution and debris, and took many resources out of Niger. So that's the big difference between the way that the U.S. Agency for International Development, NASA, and the United States in general does it. We try to go in and partner with the nations to help them develop their own human resources. So it's actually trying to develop the resources in a non-traditional partner so that they can grow their own industry, they can grow their own commercial entities, they can eventually grow their own entrepreneurs. And that's sort of the way that we approach it in the United States. Not sure whether that completely answered your question. That's also the reason that I'm not really worried. A lot of people are worried that China is going to eclipse us in space, because they've now got an orbiting space station, or at least the beginnings of it. They're trying to get international partners. They're going to replace the United States. The significant difference is when we get a partner, they are really a partner. They have an interest in what we're doing. They have a say in what we're doing. The United States does not own the International Space Station, as an example. It's a conglomeration of 5 different agencies that represent about 22 countries. And every single one of those countries has a vote when we decide, okay, are we going to allow this person or this entity to come to the International Space Station? You've got to get consensus among the member nations. You've got to get consensus for how much longer the International Space Station is going to operate. When you have that kind of partnership with disparate ideas, diverse ideas, I'll go back to the diversity and inclusion again, but when you have that kind of partnership, I think you're much more powerful and much more liable to last a long time than you are, say, with an authoritarian regime that everything is monolithic and everything comes out of the government with no input from the private sector.
Excellent answer. To get through, because I know we're running short on time, just a time check, we're at 8:15. This event will go until 8:30, so please submit your questions. We'll try and get through as many of them as we possibly can. Ali Mir says, or asks, what is the future of space for humanity? That's a pretty large question, but hopefully we can have some.
Ali. Let me tell you what I think, and this is important to understand. Everything I've said today is an opinion of one. My opinion is no better than anybody else's. I may know a little bit more about a particular topic than some of you, but that still doesn't make my opinion better than yours. So that's the critical importance of diversity and being open to diverse ideas and inclusive responses and the like. But what space I don't think is going to be to people. We are not going to provide an alternative to our Earth. Earth is unique in its existence in our solar system. Earth is the only planet that we know of in the solar system that can sustain human life the way that we know it and we love. You and I, whether it's burning hot, 100 and some odd degrees, like it is in Portland, Oregon today, or in Kuwait or Afghanistan or somewhere else, or whether it's freezing cold like in Antarctica or like it gets up into Hindu Kush now and then, we still can be very comfortable. We dress up, we go out, we don't have to put on a spacesuit. We breathe the fresh air that's coming in from the outside. You're not going to do that on Mars. You're going to be in a spacesuit or a planetary suit anytime you go outside, because the environment just is not able to sustain the life the way we know it. Remember, I showed you that thin blue line that is our atmosphere in one of my early photos. No planet in our solar system has that thin blue line that contains a sufficient amount of oxygen to sustain life as we know it. So Earth is unique, and we're always going to find ourselves coming back to the home planet for prolonged life and sustenance. We can go to Mars and we can use their resources, and we can let robots burrow into the ground and we can live there for a year or two. I don't recommend it for a lifetime. Unlike some people, I don't want to die on Mars, nor do I want any of you to die on Mars. I want you to come back and tell your story about how exciting it was to be in this totally new hostile environment and how you survived and how you innovated to make it possible to live there. Venus is another place that may actually harbor life. It definitely will not be like any life that we know here on Earth. But we're now confident enough in the scientific research that we've seen, like at the bottom of the ocean around volcanic vents where the temperature extremes are unbelievable, or under the ice of the Antarctic where it's the other way. I mean, people just couldn't exist there for long periods of time, and yet there are microbes that live there happily ever after. So we may find some of those on Venus or on Mars or other places. Life is life. So we're not talking about human life when we go to Mars or to other places, but we just want to know, can life be sustained on some of these other planets? If it can, we can use the microbial life to 3D print food, 3D print concrete. We can 3D print a lot of things if we can find microbial life on a number of these planets that we'd like to explore.
Shifting gears again, which we're going to be doing a lot since we're winding up here. Kashev Ahmed asks, what are your views on weapons in space, and how do you, if you do, see space becoming a neutral ground? And I think this is interesting in the context of government's presence or military's presence in space and the commercial sector in space as well, and what that relationship looks like and what role the international community plays in helping to moderate what weaponry is allowed in space.
Kashid, let me give you a couple of perspectives anyway. Anywhere human beings go is a warfighting domain. So you're now starting to hear people talk about how do we keep space from becoming a warfighting domain? The only way to keep space from becoming a warfighting domain is to keep human beings out. That ship has sailed. We have been star sailors for decades now. The best thing to do to keep space from becoming an active warfighting domain, the way that we have all seen around the globe, is to get human beings to work collaboratively with each other, to put rules and regulations in place, or conventions, if you will, agreements among nations, that we will not do anything that destroys the environment of Earth orbit, as an example. We learned a hard lesson when the Chinese decided that they were going to demonstrate their anti-satellite missile and demonstrate that they could shoot down one of their old satellites that had outlived its usefulness, and they did so in low Earth orbit. Whether they intended to or not, what they did was they succeeded in polluting low Earth orbit, where the International Space Station is, with debris that's probably going to be there for 100 years or more. So we've got to educate military entities, first of all, but people in general, as to what happens when you use kinetic weapons, weapons that hit something and cause it to blow apart or come apart. That's bad for places like low Earth orbit, where humans want to exist. So we're very conscious of what happens when we use nuclear weapons. So people are really, most reasonable people are really hesitant and very afraid of using nuclear weapons because of the nuclear fallout. That's the way we should look at every weapon that we want to design for use, and hopefully not take any of those to space. So keeping space as a peaceful domain, we can do, because we're all human. And we know how to collaborate and cooperate when we need to. We do it every single day. Look at the International Space Station. Russia and the United States have been incredible partners on the International Space Station for more than 20 years. Not a single conflict. And yet, if you come back to Earth, we're right now, probably our diplomatic relations are as poor as they have ever been. So it shows you, when you're working on a common goal, a common cause, and you're really interested in doing what's best for humanity, we can make even a warfighting domain remain peaceful for a long, long period of time. The International Space Station has the capability of having become a warfighting domain, but we've been collaborating and have kept it from being so.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective, and again, the domain and trying to keep it safe and preventing it from becoming hostile is critical, and international partnership is very necessary for that open dialogue and as you said, accords. And it seems like the Outer Space Treaty, even though it had been drafted so long ago, is still holding up pretty strong as it relates to that. I want to ask one of our final questions is two questions from two different people that I'm going to try and put together. Ishar Ulhaq and Shahzad James both inquire about whether there are training programs that students who are interested in space technology, satellite constellation design for Earth observation, for instance, are available to for children and for students, and if they're available for Pakistani students.
Wahak and Shahzad, let me try that, because I don't know what what the curricula are like in Pakistani universities and schools. But if the universities that are in this forum don't already have it, I would strongly recommend that they send a note to a U.S. A like school in the United States and say, hey, I understand you guys have a summer program for elementary school kids or high school kids, where you bring them in and let them use the laboratories on campus, and you try to encourage them to get interested in science and math and technology. My guess would be there are a number of universities in Pakistan that already have programs like that, but collaboration among the universities, collaboration between again, I keep using the Suparco's name, and I hope I'm not putting them on the spot, but I think as the National Space Agency for the country, they should be working collaboratively with our folk in the U.S. Embassy and finding out, what can they learn from NASA? How can they work a little bit more collaboratively with organizations like the U.S. Agency for International Development, since that's probably more along the line, and even NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That's probably more along the lines of what the Pakistani Space Agency is going to want to do at the earliest stages is Earth observing, looking at climate, looking at crop development and the like, and then finding programs whereby they can orient students to get them interested in the first place. So Wahak and Shahzad, I would encourage you to, if you have the names or the contacts for any of the people representing universities in this forum today, or even the think tanks. Think tanks are usually really good places that can come up with great ideas that people will listen to. They may not listen to you and me, but they'll listen to a think tank. Cost them a little money, but the think tank can probably come up with some innovative ideas of how they can collaborate with NASA and USAID and our own State Department right there in the embassy and the consulates around the country in getting ways to expose your children much quicker, much earlier to STEM and arts and design curriculum.
I would also point them to nasa.gov, which also has an entire website dedicated to developing curricula for various students at various levels. So feel free to go onto that website as well. All of those materials are made available to the public. There are teaching guides, there are classroom materials. So there is definitely a lot of material out there. We are winding down, and I do want to get to some of the lightning round questions. Now, these are meant to be lighthearted, so please humor me. These were crowdsourced, so it's not just me that's curious about the answers to these questions. So hopefully our Facebook audience will find them as entertaining as you do, hopefully. Okay, Star Trek or Star Wars, which do you prefer?
Star Trek.
All right. Our panelists from last week's discussion.
The peaceful domain of space, whereas Star Wars talks a little bit too much about the, let's do it, let's get it on. Is
there a particular series that you like more than the other? Original series, Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine? They're all good.
I have to go back to Star Trek. I'm LeVar Burton, Nichelle Nichols, those are, I'll go back and look at old ones.
All right. What's your favorite space-related book?
Martian.
Oh, that was a great book.
And movie.
What's your favorite non-space-related book?
Ooh, On Being. Well, no, Becoming. It's Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama's book. Now I say it's my favorite book, and then I don't even get the title right. But I cried, I laughed. I yelled, I screamed, I got angry, I got happy. It is just an incredible, incredible book.
It is an incredible book, I agree, and it made me cry also. Your favorite writer? Could be sci-fi, fiction, nonfiction.
Nikki Giovanni is a poet here in America who teaches at Virginia Tech. So if I can call a poet a writer, she's my favorite. I grew up with Nikki Giovanni's writings during the Civil Rights era.
I'll have to look that up. Favorite constellation?
Ooh, I would have to say Leo.
All right. Given the choice, would you rather go to the moon or Mars or somewhere else? Mars. Okay, I figured.
Nowhere
I actually saw a YouTube video. My friend Monica, who's at a watch party right now for a friend of our Brandon's birthday, would like to know what space smells like.
I've never done a spacewalk, and even astronauts who have done spacewalks don't really have an opportunity to know what
Mhm.
space smells like because you can't take your helmet off or you'll die. But those lieutenants coming back into the airlock, they say when they repressurize the airlock and they doff their spacesuit, there's this burning metallic smell, and so they suspect that may be what space smells like, at least in the vicinity of vehicles.
Okay, good job, Chris Hines, on that prediction. If you could have dinner with a famous contributor to the field of astronomy, living or dead, who would it be, and what would you talk to them about?
Neil deGrasse, living or dead?
Oh, yeah, it could be living or dead, but NDT he's
Neil
high on the list too.
Living, I had the opportunity to meet, I would love to meet Carl Sagan if he were here on the planet again, and I'd just listen to him talk about anything. But I'd listen to him talk about, I'd listen to him talk, both of them. I would listen to them talk about the significance of life and our role in the universe.
Okay. Which did you enjoy more, being a pilot or being a commander of the space shuttle?
Being a commander, without a doubt, because there you have the safety and well-being of your crew, and the vehicle is your responsibility, and there's nothing like being responsible for other people, but also being in a position where you can shape the way that they act. If you want diversity and inclusion, you've got to make it happen. And as a pilot, you're the second in command, so you don't make that happen. I could do it as a commander.
All right. You're aboard the International Space Station and your work for the day is complete. What do you do in your spare time?
Head to the window with a camera and just look and look and look and take a picture every once in a while if I like to.
Okay. Meeting you and speaking with you for me is like meeting Michael Jordan or Neil deGrasse Tyson. That is to say, it's a starstruck moment for me. Who makes you feel starstruck? Or who made you feel that way when you met them?
Wow. I'm going to go back to my political stuff. I was starstruck when I met President Obama, when I interviewed I didn't know I was interviewing for the position of NASA administrator. I thought I was told he wanted to pick my brain about space and NASA and stuff. And I was starstruck by meeting both him and Mrs. Obama. The other person that I am somewhat starstruck by is our present First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden. I am blown away by the fact that she is still in the classroom, and watching her dedication to education and how she works in being First Lady of the most powerful nation in the world and still being an everyday school teacher is mind-boggling to me.
Finally, and last question, as Pakistan embarks on its own space commercialization trajectory, what words of wisdom would you share with the next generation of space enthusiasts and explorers?
I guess I would do what President Obama asked me to do. Look for non-traditional partners as you try to grow. You can't do it alone. So if in the case of Saparco, look for commercial partners, look for academic partners, look for entrepreneurial partners, because we're much better when we seek diversity and in a myriad of different ideas and approaches to things. So seek diversity as broadly as you can, and be an inclusive organization. No one has a non-valuable opinion.
Well, I just want to say that in preparing for this discussion, which was hours of reading and watching YouTube videos, I came across the Bolden legacy of your son's retirement, 60 years of Bolden men serving in the United States Marine Corps. And there was one part that really stood out to me, and that was a conversation or an exchange that you had between you and your son about his worst day at the Naval Academy. And you told your son, when he expressed his concerns to you, that you wouldn't force him to stay, but what you did encourage him to do was to find someone who was having a worse day than him and to help him or her or them through it. And with that purpose and service in mind, he rose to the challenge and continue on eventually to graduate from the Naval Academy. And I don't have a follow-up question, but I just wanted to say that I found that particular exchange and reflection a powerful testament to you and your son's commitment to service. not only to your country, but to your fellow countrymen and to humanity. And it brought me to tears. And it just led me to reflect on something that you just said, which is that we're all in this together. And that somehow, if our species is going to evolve into the intergalactic planetary dwellers that we would like to be, we're going to need to find a way to help each other out along the way, to get each other through the bad days, so that we can pave a better way for tomorrow. To my mind, there's really no higher calling than that. We partner as Oh, are we there?
Yeah, you're back, Sharon. You're back.
Okay. I was just going to say, just to wrap up, we partner as communities, as agencies, and as countries, because as you said it, we go farther when we work together and when we partner. So thank you, General Bolden, Charlie, for all that you have done and all you continue to do to inspire people like me and others to be the best
Okay, I think we need to wrap it up. I want to thank Charlie Bolden. Fantastic presentation. Fascinating. Very much enjoyed it. I want to thank Sharon for moderating. And I want to thank the audience members who all sent in those great questions. I think I can agree with Charlie Bolden. There wasn't a dumb question among them. They were great. And I look forward to having you come back as an audience for future embassy webinars. And I have one last request from the organizers, like the audience to please stick around on Facebook Live for just a little bit more. We're going to ask you 3 questions to help us improve our future programming. And with that, from U.S. Embassy Islamabad, I want to sign off and I want to thank Charlie Bolden.